Hey, this is The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer, powered by Sig Sauer, Never Settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carried the best. I recommend you carry the best, and you better, because Sig Sauer is the best, Never Settle. We are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also available on the America Out Loud Podcast Network. Check us out, Project Sentinel, at Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and, of course, projectsentinel.com and .net. So today in our episode, we're going to be talking about a current event issue with my friend Andi Buerger. Andi Buerger is the founder of Voices Against Trafficking. She has a great book, The Strength of Many Voices Speaking as One, which I highly recommend. And she's a survivor herself. I'm putting up for those who are watching the cover of the book, which she graciously sent me, and I've sent out to others because she sent me a box and I give them out all the time. And without further ado, Andi, welcome to The Hard Truth.
Well, thank you, Tony. Good to be on your show again, and glad that we can be part of the solution together, getting the message out today.
So, and yeah, look, for the audience to know, you've had me participate in several of your online events, and I think it's important that people recognize three things. First, this is happening constantly right under people's noses. I don't think people recognize that this is woven, hidden within the very tapestry of society. And I think we're seeing the edges of it right now with the Epstein documents and some of the things going on south of the border. So that's the first thing. Secondly, within the context of the system, people who do this sort of thing are masters of camouflage. As I mentioned, they're hidden within our eyesight half the time. And they are are brilliant in compromising the very systems that are designed to detect and support traffic victims by the fact that they often hide within organizations to capture people. I'm aware of at least a couple of organizations. I don't want to say by name because I don't want to get sued, but I know that a couple of investigations are ongoing relating to supposed rescue organizations, which are actually involved in trafficking. It's like what's that term? The spider trap, basically. You know, they're getting ready to grab you when you come in. And then the third thing, I don't know how much we want to get into this, but the fact is that even after people are rescued and brought out, restitution takes forever, if at all. I mean, the justice on this thing is just slow. So with that said, let's start with the third point right up front. Why is it that we're only now finding out regarding the disclosure of the Epstein documents from 2012, 2013, 2014? Why, Andi, are we only now hearing about this, and the victims have been ignored and pretty much denied justice all this time?
Mm-hmm. Well, for one, if the victims were given restitution or were in any way elevated, then that, of course, would definitely not work in the predator's favor. But as far as the information, I think there was a lot of. Here's my basic line. Somebody always knows when a child or a victim is being abused or tortured. There are always people who know, whether they have the courage to stand up and say anything or make a call to a hotline or a helpline. That's a different thing. In the Epstein case, you had all of these people profiting off of the lush life that he provided them, the influencing that, hey, I'm going to be with the bigs, I'm going to be with the celebrities and do this and do that, or I can be kinky and my wife or my girlfriend or my family won't know about it because it'll be a business trip. So I am certain there is a lot of damaging information. I'm also certain that there are people who probably were in Epstein's business circles that didn't participate at all in those activities, but because maybe there's a photo of them with him, they're going to be associated with that. Yeah. So it goes both ways, Tony. But I think all of the clamoring about who's in the book and who did what, why isn't that focus on the victims? Where are they now? Who's giving them the mental health resources? Who's helping them rebuild their life? Because they cannot give them back their innocence. They cannot give them back what should have been maybe their youth or their childhood, or even young adults in college. You cannot replace that. In fact, right now, college campuses are the number one most unsafe place to be for women 18 to 24 years old. And that's all the assaults and all the trafficking.
Yeah. So you might find this funny. I'm still close friends with all my female exes from from high school and college. We all stay in touch. It's kind of funny. And man, the 80s was such a great time. And we were completely oblivious. And this didn't seem to be as prevalent back then because, you know, I mean, I talked to, again, these are girls like we hang out with. We did stupid stuff. We got drunk all the time, but there was no fear that they were going to be carted off into some lifestyle. And it just seems like a different time now because, to your point, I think it's because of the fabric of things have changed so dramatically that people are indeed actually at risk now more than before. Is that an accurate assessment? Or
I would say so, because here's the thing: we desensitized the value of children. You know, take the Cuties movie, which we led a huge campaign against. Okay, putting 10, 9, 12-year-old girls up there gyrating and sexy outfits and stuff in movie theaters. Okay, everybody knew that was involved with that particular project. The parents of those children knew, but they wanted the fame or the notoriety or the whatever it was they got out of that. Okay, so we have desensitized the value of children in this society. We have put them back to being chattel, to being of zero value at any stage of life form. Okay, so that's one thing. And think about all the way from women's movement forward, how we have desensitized caring about people, whether it's your gender role or partner role or whatever you call it, whatever you want to call it. We no longer care about our neighbor the way that we used to. We no longer care about what happens over there as long as it's not over here. Okay, but we may have opinions about it. We have a lot of angry people out there, and hurt begets anger, anger begets violence. Okay,
right.
It's just that line, and I know you know that. So right now, with all of this ruckus about the book, my thought is, forget the book, go help the victims, rebuild their lives. And if things come out and you can arrest somebody, great, but you haven't done it in a timely manner. So the chances of that happening are very slim. I'm actually surprised that Maxwell is still, breathing, to be honest. I mean, she got
me too.
Yeah, something big out of it to be able to hold on to that for so long.
So let's talk about that for a little bit. I do believe there's some deeper issues that go with it. Look, I'm a spy. I'm a retired spy. We were taught very early on, Andi, the concept of honeypots. And that I'm not saying anything here that people haven't seen or where there's the added technique called brownstoning, where you use the honeypot for purposes of doing a secondary, getting the target into bed with someone underage, and then, to your point, getting that on film. So a couple of things I'm trying to put in context. I mean, I've seen some word combinations come out that I never would have thought I'd see in the media over the past couple of weeks. Who would ever thought they would see the name Stephen Hawking with nude midgets working quadratic equations on a blackboard? I mean, who'd have thought? And I'm only making light of this by the fact that they compromised that guy. I mean, whatever fantasy he had, these people were able to orchestrate and pay for. And then, by extension, he's not the only one. And Stephen Hawking to me is like, I don't know why you wanted to get a guy in a wheelchair who's basically writing scientific theories to be compromised, but they did. I'm sure he did something in some role in some place regarding what they wanted done. But that's my point, is that they used enormous resources, Andi, to basically get these guys to commit essentially horrific criminal acts. I don't think we've even heard of the worst yet, because often so much of what I've read about this is it's not about sex. It's about power. It's about abuse. Absolutely. And so much of what I suspect happened here, and to your point about Maxwell still being alive, some of these people who went down there had to have committed to doing some really horrific things. And I think this is where the victims, and I guess that's the question I have. Do you think victims should be speaking out more readily about what happened, or is there an embarrassment factor that prohibits them or precludes them from wanting to do that?
Well, first point is, yes, there's always shame, guilt, humiliation. I mean, even when somebody's been somebody's intern, in a high power, and then years later regrets it, or somebody has had nude photos taken and they become Miss America and then they get dethroned. So we always have those folks that do something, maybe with the belief that it's what they believe in, or that there really is something on the other end of that job offer or that opportunity, and then find out that they were drastically wrong. There was, I remember, it's been years, but there was a mother that spoke out shortly after Epstein was discovered in his jail cell. And she said, well, you know, my daughter shouldn't be held accountable because she was only the third captain. And that, in that scenario, she was probably recruited very young and grew up, so to speak, through that organization. She's getting the clothes, she's getting the attention, she has to do these nasty things, but you know, hey, at least I've got all of this stuff. I've got nice hair, nice nails, whatever, but then becomes a recruiter herself because that's the grooming. Yep. And so they can't leave that life because, one, they'd probably not survive it. They'd probably be killed or something would happen. But the other part of it is, even if they did survive it, they're leaving something they don't know how to operate in outside of. So some of the folks that we've rescued, reintegrating them into community on minimum wage when they've been stripping and been sold for all of this money, even though they didn't get the money, they know they could make that. It's really hard to get them to understand there's a better way of life, and it may not be as lucrative, you know, in the beginning, but you need to do this. Otherwise, you're going to be back in that horrible situation. Only 1 out of 100 survivors, or 1 out of 100 trafficking victims survive, Tony. We know that. We know the average age is 12 to 13 years old, girls or boys now, and that, you know, they're sold 20, 25 times a day. How can America stand for that? How can we sit every night having our dinner with our own children or without children and know that every 40 seconds a child 18 years or under is abducted in this country? That means they're lured into something they didn't know, like a summer job or something they thought was safe, or candy for a little kid or a toy, or they're actually taken. So how do we stand for that? By the time this interview is over, we're going to have lost, I don't know how many more kids. I'm not a math major, but it'll be a lot. Yeah. So where is America? Where are the people that say, you know what? This is wrong. It's not right versus left. It's right versus wrong.
Right. And so I agree with you. And I look, I'm aware, again, from my own experience, having been a target of this and being able to have avoided it. Thank goodness. I had some good advisors, which I don't want to name because I don't want to be named, but I was warned, early warning. It's like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we think is going to happen. This is what they're going to do. And I met one of those girls you're talking about who basically was seduced very early into the process. She basically is a prisoner of the process. I mean, she basically is, they keep her broke. They move her around. They basically direct her to do certain things. And it basically, from my understanding of the intel on this person, started probably when she was 9 or 10. And then by the time you get into your teens, you're basically groomed, and by the time you're in your 20s, you're an operative. You basically become part of the very thing that. And I don't think people understand. Like, no, this is a real process that people are put into. And
it's a business. It's a business for the predators. And if there was no demand, there wouldn't be a need to supply. And if there's no supply and demand, there is no profit. And then nobody would be doing this, right? But in a perfect world. However, we know we can't get rid of depraved nature. That's just part of the human condition. However, what we can do is at least turn the tide from the predators' favor over to the victims. And that's one of the things that we advocate very hard for, because like you said, there are people out there that are more stealth and smarter than any of us that will find a way, like you were, to set you up. Just like the swatting thing lately, you know, if you don't like somebody, we'll go have them swatted, you know, have their house surrounded by SWAT teams and scare the heck out of you and your family, things like that. So again, where is the median where we come back to what America started as? People that wanted a different life, people that were willing to sacrifice themselves so somebody else could have freedom, somebody else could live in truth. And I get this sometimes, well, you know, it just started like a few decades ago. And I'm like, no, trafficking's been around since probably Cain and Abel, because there's been a trade of human life for sex, for labor, for debt repayment since Roman, Greco, all those eras. This is just the fact. Now our country happens to be number one now and bringing it to a whole new level.
Well, I think that's the key is like, and again, as we postulated at the beginning of our conversation, this is hidden in plain sight. People don't see it, yet it's there. And I think that's one of the things. Obviously, I support your cause and the Voices Against Trafficking and what you're doing to educate folks, because people need to start looking. It's amazing what you don't see if you don't look, right? I mean, if you're not looking for it, it's like, oh, I don't see anything. And I think this is what I think we need to do, is help people become aware that, look, if you see something, if it looks odd, it probably is. You know, God gave you instincts for a reason. Use them. But let's talk for a minute about the nature of freedom and who we are. So I always say, and this is a bit off topic, but I think related to what we're trying to talk about here. I always say people get American exceptionalism wrong. American exceptionalism is not that we're better than everybody else, that everybody else can come here and be American. They can have these freedoms. That's the exceptionalism. Mm-hmm. That you can come from any country and be us. And I think that's the key. And the key to that is freedom, the idea to have the ability of choice. And so many people in the world, and this, I went to high school in Lisbon, Portugal. I saw firsthand how other cultures treat women and treat life, how life, and I was in Afghanistan, I've been in Latin America, I've been in the Far East. I'm telling you right now, Americans don't understand how life is devalued and not treated with the proper respect. And that's part of what we're dealing with here. We have people within our own culture who have a third world mentality when it comes to human beings. I'll just say it that way because, the Arab world, and look, I've got a lot of Islamic friends in England. They are, I want to say they're reformed Islamists by the fact that they do believe in equality of women and men. They treat women. I've dealt with Pakistanis. I actually met with Ambassador Sherhi Rahman, who was the ambassador from Pakistan to the United States at one point. Again, you don't get to be an ambassador if you're not someone who's respected within the culture. But there are other cultures who degrade women and degrade children. And those are some of those at the Southwest border. So let's talk a little bit about that, because again, it's not just overseas. We're talking about at our own Southwest border. These issues are resident. And last week, I think it was last week, we had my dear friend, former Assistant Secretary for Western Hemisphere, Assistant Undersecretary for Western Hemisphere in the Pentagon, Jose de la Pena. I'm Sergio de la Pena. Sorry, Sergio de la Pena. Well, I got my friend Jose Oliveira, who's my boss in Afghanistan. We all mix each other up. So anyway, but Sergio was on the show, and he, as the Assistant Secretary, was also the attaché to Venezuela at one point. He's a retired Army colonel. And we were going through all of this, how basically, because the Southwest border is no longer under U.S. control, all U.S. laws and concerns are pretty much ignored by the fact that cartels are the ones running this. The cartels are the ones who basically engage for profit, big profit, I might add, the human trafficking, complete denial or just no interest in preserving the innocence of children, the protection of women. It means nothing to them. It's all about money. Yeah. And at this point, we, the U.S. government, because we are trying to create a funnel for these people, we're the ones actually paying the cartels for the privilege of basically putting people into slavery.
Absolutely.
Am I correct on that?
You are absolutely correct. I mean, even a couple of years ago, once the border was open, first of all, there was no control over how many kids came over, what was being done with them, whether they were partnered up. All of the social services that were pulled were saying, we can't match this up or that up. And then you have the posers. So cartels are smart, right? They use posers to say, oh, I'm the aunt or I'm the uncle. And, and even in the foster care system that happens. And I've got a story coming out in our next magazine, later on this year. And it's about that very thing. And so you have the posers. So nobody has a checks and balance because there's so many coming over. And we know that the millions that have come over, not only have they run over all the cities on the southern border, and we're getting this from the northern border too, by the way. It's not just the southern, but we talk more about that. We have counterparts on the border of U.S. Mexico. They cannot keep up with the number of kids that they try to rescue and put in shelters. They don't have enough shelters. They don't have enough money to keep up with it. So these cartels, a couple of years ago, the average rate for a kid would be about $3,200, $3,400. And anybody could come pick up a child that was unattended or that the cartels provided and do whatever you wanted with them. Now imagine if you're a 12-year-old boy or girl and your parents think they're sending you over the border for a better life, but doesn't work out that way. And usually the girls and women, 80% at least, are raped before they even get over the border. Okay.
Yeah.
We've heard about the raping trees. All right. And as disturbing as it is, it's still true. So when these kids come over, they're not speaking our language. How do they work? How do they support themselves if they manage to survive or escape? Okay. Where do they go? We're not helping them. That is not compassionate, as we were told when all of that started. So now the cartels have had enough time to figure out, woohoo, look what we can do, right?
Yeah.
U.S. is going to protect us because once we get these kids over the border, they have to get into a center. They have to go through a process that should take 30 days, Tony, as you know, but it's only taking 10 or 12 days. Too fast. Going through the system like, okay, just put them in a house, put them somewhere. Right. And it really is, let's just sell them.
So this is where, again, it's not a left or right issue. And I want people to understand that nobody within the context of my conversations on this with law enforcement or Homeland Security, you or other advocates and folks who have actually trying to do this are political. This is not a political issue. And yet, because there are, I'm going to say this, and I'm not trying to get you in trouble, but there are political issues that justify within a context of a party why they're doing this. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't want you to respond. You don't have to respond. You can if you want. My belief is certain elements of the left, not even the Democrat Party, because I know I have Democrats I talk to on a regular basis. Certain elements of the progressive left have decided that they want to have a permanent underclass of people who will always basically seek to support their causes by the fact that they're brought to the country and given opportunity. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with that is, okay, to get here and have the opportunity, you're actually benefiting the cartels and criminal elements because mm-hmm. the illegal alien communities are most put upon and terrorized by criminal elements. We're not doing them any favors. And the issue relating to human trafficking is an extension of this idea that, oh, we're giving children better lives. No, you're not, because you're not actually managing a process from intake to process to outtake. And if you're not managing that process, there's all sorts of people with nefarious views and objectives and profit-making objectives that could care less about altruism. They just don't care. And this is my issue by the fact that people who are politicians don't pay enough attention to this, because certain politicians see benefit to allowing the system to be in the chaos it is. It's not about not having laws. It's about the chaos that exists because they're not enforcing laws. Is that an extreme position I'm taking?
And now, actually, in the volume 2 of the Voices of Courage magazine, we just put out a couple weeks ago, there's a perfect article, on the border, chaos kills. Okay.
Chaos.
So when there's chaos, there's confusion. People don't know what to do. They'll either take the easiest path, like a sheep, and the one sheep that maybe doesn't go that way is going to get slaughtered anyways because there's only one of them. So that's why when we talk about collective voices together, we're stronger. Right. If we band together. Why don't we band together on this one issue, regardless of party, regardless of religion, regardless of anything? It's a human issue. Yep. Human trafficking is a crime against humanity. Okay, but you have to decide that humans have value and worth. Okay, regardless of what they look like, what package they're in, what they believe. This used to be a free country where you could say whatever you want, but now criminals can bust down, businesses. There's so many repeat offenders that get released and they murder or they harm. We have criminals that come across the border, as well as U.S. criminals trying to go back to Mexico or other places. So it is chaos. And that is why we as American people, American citizens, right now in this country, if you're in this country, you need to stand up. You need to decide you're either one of three things. You're a person that does good, you're a person that does nothing, or you're a person that does evil. Only one of those things is productive for the future of humanity. Our children are the future of any country worldwide. If we annihilate them, sell them for organs, use them for chattel or sexual perversions, what kind of people are we? What kind of nation is this? Because again, it started long before, just like the argument about, oh, well, it's this party that started human trafficking. Well, let me just set the record straight, Tony, if you don't mind.
No, please. I've heard. No, this goes on both parties. I've heard the Republican side on this too. No, I'm aware.
I was born in 62, and the abuse and the trafficking began for me at age 6 months and went until 17 years old. In those days, they didn't even talk about child abuse. If there was something weird like that, they swept it under the carpet, or they didn't believe you. And so, let alone trafficking, which they didn't have a term even back then. But my family members, my immediate members, and a few extended members all participated in various acts against my person. And of course, that involves your mind, your body, your soul. That by the age of 5 years old, I decided it would be better to be dead. And that was my first attempt at suicide, because that's how desperate, the screams, the cries, no one was listening. I begged God to let me die or let them kill me, because I just wanted out. I could, as a 5-year-old child, a tiny child, I was that desperate. And the good news is that when I went to the curb of my house to jump in front of a car to kill myself, no car came by. And as I sat there waiting, I looked into the sky and I thought, maybe there's something or someone bigger. And so in that moment, I heard this voice in my heart, which in my life is God. And he said, this is not the plan I have for you. Suicide is not the answer. So explain to me how in the 60s then, and the last time my birth mother tried to kill me, I was 17. So that's that part of my life. Okay. Wow. So explain to me how there was no QAnon. There were no parties, promoting predatory activities or blaming each other for crimes and things like that. None of that was there in the 60s. So to say it's all one party is completely wrong.
No, and God bless you for being here. No, Andi, I thank you for sharing that. Look, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've done very dangerous things and contemplated suicide myself, to be honest with you. So look, I appreciate the fact that you made the right choice and God was able to kind of show up when he was needed. I think God tends to do that if you listen carefully. Yeah. I tend to believe God talks to us through other people as well, which is great. So I'm glad you're here to share your message and continue to help us educate those who need to understand how serious this is. So we got to take a break. Okay. We're going to be coming back with part 2 of The Hard Truth, Tony Shaffer, right after this break. Stand by and come right back. Hey, this is The Hard Truth, Tony Shaffer, part 2, still powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. As I always say, you better choose what I chose, which is Sig Sauer, because it's the best. We're on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network and on their podcast network. Check us out, Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.net.com. And of course, a shout out to our friend Cherie Curry. Cherie does our bumper and theme music. God bless you, Cherie. We always appreciate your support to our show. And we're now joined in part 2 of the show. Andi Buerger's sticking around for part 2. And we're now joined by the persnickety Chris Cordani and the contextual Elizabeth Breckenkamp. Welcome all to part 2 of the show. So
the Felix Unger of radio persnickety.
That's right. So we're jumping right back in. So Andi, we were just talking, and as we were running up to this, everybody here has had some form of, I think, challenge to overcome in their life. Everybody does. I mean, it's one of those things that we're all, I think, apt to learn lessons that God, whatever, I believe in God too. So whatever spirit or being you care to believe in. I mean, if you're Stephen Hawking, I guess you believe in midgets. Who knows? I mean, I don't know these things, but
he believes in science. Yeah.
He she blinded
me with
science.
God created science, but he doesn't want to admit God created science. So.
That's right. Miss Sakamoto, you are beautiful, as the song goes. Anyway, that's a different song. Right, Chris? Come on. You know that song. Yeah. Thomas Dolby, she blinded me with science. Well, our 80s guy is falling down here, for goodness sake.
I was going to say, I was blinded by that. And the funny thing was, the same professor who was the male professor was also the lead into the follow-up hit Hyperactive by Thomas Dolby.
That's right.
There we go. I think I redeemed myself right now.
That's right. There we go. Good recovery there, Chris. Anyway, by the way, Andi, we all do social media and 80s and other shows, right, Chris?
Sometimes, yes, we do.
I remember that.
We love 80s music. Yeah.
We do. I just like to give a shout out to the 80s earlier. It was great. Anyway, so let's get back to the topic though of overcoming diversity and that sort of thing. So one of the things, Andi, you guys continue to do is try to get people to pay attention. So I know you've tried to work with members of Congress. You've tried to get organizations to pay more attention to this. Obviously, we're one of your allies as an organization. We're always there,
Yes,
standing
thank
by to do
you.
what we can. But what can the average person do on this sort of thing? What do you, if we have, 15, 20 people who listen to our show today and say, man, what can I do to help? What would you ask them to do? What do you think that would be good for them to do?
I love that question, because the first thing I always encourage people to do is go to our website, voicesagainsttrafficking.com, where we have helplines and hotlines. Put those numbers in your phone today. If you see something, you can say something without feeling embarrassed or uncomfortable. The people on the other end of all of those lines, whether it's suicide prevention, addiction, military help, human trafficking, child abuse awareness, any of that, or if you feel you're on the edge and you might become an abuser, those lines are there for you to use. And they are safe anywhere in this country, in the US. Whoever you are talking to will find you help or find you resources in your area. So first thing, doesn't take but a couple of minutes. Put those numbers in your phone, and also age appropriate children, if they are old enough to understand what those numbers are for, put them in their phone as well, because guess what? Kids will tell other kids about something that's wrong, usually before they'll tell an adult.
Right.
The second thing then is, of course, become more aware. Get one of our books, listen to shows like this, look at podcasts, find out more information. Our goal is, one, to create greater awareness through books, magazines, music CDs. We're going to have a comedy CD out later this year, a TV show, things like that. We're trying to reach you. If you haven't heard enough about human trafficking, or you don't think it happens in your area, trust me, it absolutely does. We have rescued hundreds and hundreds of kids from families of all backgrounds, all genders, all cultures, all everything. Human trafficking has nothing to do with that. It has to do with somebody wanting to use another human being for profit or sexual deviancy. So the numbers. The other thing is, go to your local law enforcement, find out what they want you to report, or if they're even reporting it, if they've even had training on this. If you've voted for a school board member or the mayor, find out what they've done. If they can't show you that they've actually done anything to protect the children in your community, that they're working to make sure you have a safer community to live in, or a community that would be welcoming of, we relocate victims all the time. So welcoming of people who have been hurt, then recall them, don't support them, pull your money away, vote for someone else. Because a lot of people say a lot of things before the votes come in, right? But if they have not acted on it, then don't trust it. And that's really as harsh as I can get on that one, because they don't deserve to be a leader if they cannot even tell you how they plan to protect your families. Okay. And then, of course, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. So everything we do, whether it's the education part, because we believe that being aware leads to prevention. Prevention is the way to end human trafficking and 21st century slavery. Maybe not all at one time, but if we have less victims, that's the goal. And your child, your niece, your nephew, your sister, your brother, your uncle, your aunt could be the next victim. We don't want that to happen. I know as a survivor over 6 decades that you never, ever leave that. It's part of your life. It doesn't have to define your life, but it is a life sentence for victims. Even one sexual assault can change the course of a person's life. Any abuse, as we were talking about. So if you have $1 or you have $2, that's another way to help. Maybe you don't have time, maybe you don't have a lot of money, but you can go to our site, get information, look at the Be Aware, Stay Safe program that we offer. Tony, 4 minutes a day, really, 21 days, a whole habit will be changed in your family unit. And so 4 minutes a day for training, you can have taco night with the kids and do that. And so we want to create conversations, and we also want to encourage people who don't know how to start them with their children to reach out to us for help. Because when you open the conversation in a way that says, we're not trying to police you, we're trying to protect you, but this issue is bigger than all of us, even your mom and dad, so let's talk about how we work as a family. One is to start using a code, a special code word that's generic, like don't forget your lunch. Okay, if you get that phrase and that's your family's code phrase, you know something is wrong, you go get your child, you go get your college student. whatever it is, you can discuss whether there was poor judgment or something that happened later, but don't come down on the kids until you have that opportunity to find out what really happened.
Right.
Okay. We all make I don't know about you guys, but I've made bad choices.
Oh yeah, no, I made bad.
You may not have been a rebellious teenager, but I know they're out there. So I'm just saying that if we make it safe for our kids of any age to speak to us, that will also be prevention in action.
So those are all great points. And one of the things I always encourage people, as you point out, Andi, is personal involvement. So one of the things that I've done, and this overlaps with one of my personal points I always try to make when I do talks, is get involved. And one of the things I actually sit here in Chowan County on the social services committee. And so we deal with this directly. The committee deals with this because one of the things that we see overlapping is drug abuse and child abuse. And a lot of these kids get into these abuse situations and then get further down the path because of drugs, drugs, people who are selling drugs. One of the things about kids, they can be sold over and over. Unlike drugs, you don't have to get more. You can. Unfortunately, it's a very horrific process. And so one of the things I do sit on the local the social services board, because we work here with the law enforcement folks in the state of North Carolina to basically protect these kids, to get them out of the situation. So whenever we can work together with your advocacy and state organizations who are actually involved in this, the better off everybody is, because there's got to be a complete process to help get these kids out of bad situations. And again, to your point, this happens right here in little old Edenton, North Carolina. There was a case I don't want to get into because of confidentiality, but there was a situation kind of like we're talking about, which I'm aware of from local events here locally. So these things do happen. And sometimes because of legality, in this case, we can't talk about it, but there are other things which do become public, and people have to be given a path of understanding of what to do to help resolve things. So,
and your gut instinct, like you said, those little neck hairs that we have, the kind of like something just doesn't feel right when you see an older man, maybe with a girl that looks dressed up a little bit older than maybe she really is, things like that. A really quick example, we had a member on an airplane, or going to her airplane rather, she saw a gentleman, probably 40-ish, with a little tiny baby all covered up with a blanket, couldn't see the head, but was crying. And so she just had a sense something wasn't quite right, but she had to make her next flight. But what she did was she turned around, pretended to take a selfie of herself and the board that shows all the flights. So she got a part of him and the baby in the blanket in that picture, but she also waited and saw what flight he was going on, where he was going to board. And so when she got on her plane, she told the flight attendant, all flight attendants, all airlines are supposed to be training regularly on this, what she had witnessed. And when she landed, the flight attendant had notified TSA and given them all the information. And so she got on the next flight, and anyway, in between called me. I called another person in DC that's on our team. I said, look, this is what's happening. She can't call right now, but here's the deal. And so she got all the information, all these pictures. Our gal in DC got Homeland Security on it, and in 4 hours there was an open case, and they were tracking this guy.
Excellent. Excellent.
In 4 hours.
Yeah, in 4 hours. So we try to work fast to help whenever we can in active cases. But when we're traveling, when we're in a restaurant and we see something that doesn't look quite right, that's where those numbers can be involved. We had another couple that actually took a picture of the license plate of a gentleman with a young boy, and felt like something wasn't quite right, just by the way, the body language of the child, the control factor of the handler or predator himself, it could have been. And so they were able to give that to the police. So it was something, right? My whole life would have changed if somebody would have spoken up, if I knew there were people looking for me. Now, I do have a great life now, but nobody wants to go through that pain. None of you who have had the adversity wants anyone else to go through that adversity. Right. So how about we all work together, right?
Right. Yep. I know what you mean. Oftentimes I've been in situations where you can just tell by the child's face.
Yes.
you know, like you're talking about body language, sometimes just like in the perfect spot, talking about places where the sex trafficker, you know, the ones who are looking for children, one of the best places is Disney World.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh. But I knew, you know what? I knew about that like 30 years ago. And I'm thinking, am I the only one? Because I remember first learning about that at least 30 years ago. It's like, why is like this just not in the news? But another thing, you know, you're talking about how the people who want to find the children, they want to groom the children, right? They do know the best places to go, places for like Disney World. But I worked in several different daycares a long time ago when I was much younger, and that's another place. And I hate to say it, but every single daycare I worked in was owned by a woman. And of course, you know, I got there and I was working with 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and they had interviewed a guy who said he wanted to work in the daycare. And I immediately just got like a bad sensation, you know, just that bad feeling. But the director's like, well, no, you know, we should be fair. You know, if he has a qualification, like, did you do a background check? Well, we did. Sure enough, they hired this guy. Like 6 months later, they had to fire him. And I won't go into the details, but it's like, and I hate to say it, but some places just should not hire men. And I don't care if he is squeaky clean. He might come across as Mr. Rogers. You don't have men. Of course, I've met a few women who shouldn't be working with young children.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that one. Yeah. Now, the thing is, these people who want to get closer to children know how to do it.
Exactly. That's my point.
They'll even go out of the way to get the expertise to join a profession that gets them close to children. And this is another
young
issue,
children.
right?
Yeah.
And then that has to be hard to detect too. When these people are just getting this education, finding their way, but they'll go through great lengths to do so. Andy, how do parents and maybe friends or anybody who sees what's happening in that respect see the signs?
Well, first of all, like Tony said, be involved. Okay, ask the questions. Whoever runs a daycare, whoever owns a daycare, do background checks. Ask for background checks. Have you checked for, you know, pedophilia? Have you checked for this? And people can change their names legally and stuff too. It depends on what the situation is. But again, show up at that school or that daycare. Sit in unexpectedly, right? Just show up.
Unexpectedly.
I had a break, or I had a couple hours, and I just am so thankful for you having my child. I just wanted to come and see what I could do to help, right? And find out how their behavior changes or doesn't change. Nursing professions, anything that is a helpful profession, or like you said, access to kids. We have numerous examples of universities from Pennsylvania to Michigan to USC who have all had scandals, you know, with trusted either coaches, doctors, whoever, football, everything. And we should learn from those experiences, but we really aren't. But you're right. And I do want to say female predators are almost as prevalent as male. We hear more about the male to female, but like in my case, my birth mother was the orchestrator of all evil. But and Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, we have very slick operators, and then a lot of times they'll work in tandem, male and female. You know, maybe it's a couple, and they are helping you watch your kid, or hey, come over to our house and play with Sally or Joe. You know, and things like that. But do we know? Are there other kids in that house? Have we seen the brother or the older sister that might be babysitting your kid? So we have to put energy. And I hear that, well, I'm busy. We work 2 jobs. We do all this. Well, that's great. But your first priority, if you have given birth or adopted a child, is to that child. If you're in charge of a child, as an adult, you have no excuse for not having their welfare above anything. Because I know kids that will eat top ramen every night just to feel safe and loved. I rescued a lot of them. So that's my take on that, Chris. Sorry.
Well, that's okay, because
that makes sense.
That's perfect. And not only does it make sense, it's your take, and now it's time for Tony's takes.
Oh, boy.
That, my friends, is powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle. Tony, you never settle. We heard that a few times. Settle. As a matter of fact.
I don't settle. Especially, I don't settle for midgets either, but that's a different story.
Oh, no, all right. I do settle for mathematics, though. I like my physics and things. Anyway, let's get into this. I know you. Let's get this easy one out of the way, because I want to hear it anyway. Defense
All right.
Secretary Lloyd Austin did technically go AWOL for a while and was hospitalized over the holidays, as you know this. This while the Biden administration didn't even know what's going on. This bears the question. It covers both lack of transparency and lack of communication. But how about this one? Is there maybe something where you're looking, an epidemic of a lack of respect for the president at this point amongst his administration?
So let me answer that in two parts. First, this is essentially a test, Chris. You and I share several interests regarding science fiction. Basically, this was a test run of the new DEI version of Lost in Space, where basically Dr. Smith is black, and this was Austin's tryout for it. So there you go. So so Lloyd Austin will be the next Dr. Smith in the next revision of Lost in Space.
Oh,
and by the way, I think he'll do a great job. Lost. You know, he's already proven he can get lost, right?
I guess that's a good point. Yeah.
Biden is lost every day, though. But
well, that brings me to my next point, Elizabeth. Look. One of the things I've said over and over, not be funny, although I often am, thank you very much, is that I've been friends and mentors with a lot of the Reagan folks. And one of the things that Bud McFarlane and Ed Meese and, God rest Bud, and Ed's still around, and I talk to Ed on a regular basis, is those guys, before we had cell phones and real-time communications, were talking to each other constantly. John Lehman used to tell me how they would get together after they read like the New York Times and talk to each other on the phone to find out what's going to come next. How do we anticipate events so we can stay ahead of them? And again, this was the 80s. So these guys had to make the effort to actually communicate. Now you could literally, and I know this because I used to text some of the cabinet members of the Trump administration. I could text them and I would get a text back within 10, 15 minutes max. And we always kind of tracked each other because it was important. So to your point, the fact that Joe Biden can't distinguish between an Etch-a-Sketch and a phone regarding responding, I think that, why would you respond to someone who they may actually direct you to microwave tapioca or launch a strike on Putin? You don't know what's going to come out of his mouth. So why would you talk to him?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go for.
You shouldn't have that red hot button right next to the microwave then, because that's
hot button.
That works.
Hot pockets. Oh, whoops, wrong thing.
Oh, that's gotta hurt.
Look, let me ask you a question, Elizabeth. Since you're an expert, do you think that basically Doctor, I'm using air quotes, Dr. Joe Biden, did weren't you impressed as was I in her New Year's presentation? How do you? I was amazed that she was able to get every under $1 Dollar General ornament on a dress. How do you do that? I mean, she made it look so cool too. Just saying. I mean, that was amazing.
I have to wonder what kind of a doctor she really is.
She's sparkly.
I know that. Dental proctology.
Not a doctor of intergalactic environmental psychology like Dr. Smith?
No, dental proctology. You got to know what things coming and going if you're going to be with Joe Biden. Just saying.
Or is it a PhD in BS? There we go.
I don't know.
I like that. All right, let's go for this one. The Department of Justice can't get enough of January 6th. Now they're going to try to go after nonviolent January 6th protesters who were just there and who did not enter the Capitol building.
Well, they'll be coming to Tony Shaffer's door. Yeah.
Right. What's your take, Tony?
So, look, if they want to invest in going after people who basically who were engaged in moping with intent to loiter, that is their option. But I still believe that at some point this is gonna fall back on them in a bad way. And by the way, my friend Ray Epps, Ray, the guy that got me suspended from Twitter because I called out the fact that he was calling for violence in the Capitol. Mm-hmm. Did you see that he got off with a $500 fine and a year suspended sentence? That guy was like breaking the perimeter and calling for violence. And how is it that people who simply, to your point, Chris, just kind of showed up and wandered around, wondering what Nancy Pelosi's office smelled like, if it smelled like patchouli or Chardonnay? I think it's Chardonnay, personally. Just saying.
Chardonnay and ice cream. That's what it smells like.
Chardonnay and ice cream, not patchouli. But patchouli, I think I'm sure there smells of patchouli somewhere on Capitol Hill. Just saying. So.
That would be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's office.
That's right. Who, by the way, was, she was like hiding in her bathroom. Did I tell you guys that I once was shown what's in those congressional bathrooms? Did I tell you that
No.
before? So basically, my friend, Congressmember Louis Gohmert, I love Louis. Louis said, Tony, come back here. Let me show you what's in these private areas of our office. And he showed me that next to the bathroom is this big old-fashioned safe. So in the old days, Louis said that if you wanted something done, you had to have a safe to put those stacks of $100 bills into once they bribed you. Just saying. So not that members of Congress are corrupt. I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't know these things, but I just know
Oh
what
my
Louis showed.
gosh.
Safety first, I guess. That's what it is.
Safety.
All right.
You got to hide that money. So.
We have about a couple minutes left, so let's have some fun here. Andy, Tony, Elizabeth, quick one here. Frank Burns or Major Charles Emerson Winchester III?
Frank Burns.
Frank.
Frank.
See, everybody likes Frank. Frank should have stayed.
Way
That's what I
funnier.
Yeah,
Way
I mean,
funnier.
He is.
the other guy was just never much. I mean, I don't
Not
know.
a good party guest.
No.
No, he
I'm
was
sure
just so
Frank-
pompous and, narcissistic.
That was the point. I kind of liked Winchester, but Frank definitely was better. Again, and again, maybe I'll throw this at you too.
But
Blake or Potter?
Oh, Henry Blake.
Blake.
Absolutely.
Of
Blake.
course.
Yeah,
Potter was
I go
boring.
with
I mean,
Henry Blake
boring,
too.
yeah.
He was always getting ready to go fishing, He always had
Yes.
the hat with the fishing lures. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
Great
right.
expectations.
Clayne Stevenson should never have left that show. That was not his best destiny leaving that show.
No, as a matter of fact, his career and his character were destroyed by a bomb, weren't they?
Hello, Larry. Hello, Larry was part of that bomb. So just saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we go, Chris, I have a question for you, for all of you. Which Frank Burns, movie or TV series?
Yeah, I like the movie Houlihan and the TV Burns.
I
Andy?
like the
any
TV.
preference?
I think I'm gonna go TV.
I like the
How about
TV
you,
Frank
Elizabeth?
Burns. Yeah.
But I'm with Chris. Man, Hot Lips. Who would ever forget the shower scene in